Francisco Massiani. A gift for Julia. When insecurity and fear prevail, the end is always sad. A boy in love must choose a very special gift for his dream girl. With just a few bucks, he must surprise her, seduce her, and make her fall in love. After studying different options, he decides to gift the girl a chicken, but in the end, fear plays a trick on him. By Fernando Chelle. A Gift for Julia is a short story by Venezuelan writer Francisco Massiani, Caracas, Venezuela, 1944, born François Massiani Antonietti and popularly known as Pancho Massiani. The story is part of the book Las Primeras Hojas de la Noche, 1970, published in Caracas by Monte Avila Editors. This book, as well as his short story collection El Lanero Solitario Tiene la Cabeza Pelada como un cepillo de dientes, 1975, has been very popular in his country since its publication. The reason for its popularity may be that it can reach a wide range of readers. Most of the protagonists in these stories are teenagers facing the problems of life for the first time. Generally, Massiani's short stories have a first-person narrator, as in the analyzed text, that shows us a colloquial, emotive, and sometimes humoristic language, typical of the teenage years. And the teenage world is precisely the prime matter in Massiani's stories, their first moments of happiness and sadness of the daily life. The main topic of the story is insecurity, embodied in the actions carried out by the main character. In short, the argument can be resumed like this: Juan, a hesitant young man, faces the difficulty of choosing a birthday gift for his friend Julia, of whom he is in love, although he does not express it explicitly. His inexperience and improvisation lead him to gift her with a chicken, a gift that he does not dare to give her in the end. Juan, who is both the protagonist and the narrator of the story, refers some past events to the readers. The story begins with a brief meditation about the reason that triggers the action, the choice of the gift for Julia. Then, in what we can state as a second moment of an internal structure of the story, he refers to the visit he paid to the girl's house, a visit prior to her birthday, which will make the readers know the characteristics of the two main characters, and also the characteristics of Carlos, a character that is mentioned in the narrative. This moment ends when Julia and the protagonist come to an agreement of meeting the next day at 3:30 in the cafeteria. The third moment of the internal structure takes place the day after the visit, that is, on the day of the meeting. This segment tells Jorge's journey through different places and also his meditation, in the search of the right gift. It is here when he sees a rabbit and thinks that the ideal gift for Julia would be a chicken. Once Juan has the right gift in his hands, we move on to the fourth and last moment of the narrative, the longest and most tense part of the story, the moment of the date in the cafeteria. The object that will trigger the action of the story and that occupies the meditations of the protagonist in the first two paragraphs of the text, is already present in the title of the work. A Gift for Julia is an emblematic title which advances in the main topic of the story and shows what the role of the protagonist will be, because although the name of the girl appears in the title, the story is actually about the psychological processes and the personal universe of the young protagonist, aspects that will be known in depth. It is not even necessary that we finish the first paragraph of the story to realize that it is narrated in a very natural way. The narrative voice, in first person, is the voice of the teenager who, far from any aestheticism, chooses to express himself in the colloquial and daily language of young Venezuelans. After making a brief meditation about what would be a good gift for Julia, Juan makes a reference to Carlos, a young man who will be an antagonist in the story, but who will only appear referred, and never takes part in the actions of the story. In any case, Carlos is described as a rude young man, somewhat more experienced than Juan, but perhaps the fundamental trait of the character, what characterizes him most, is that he also aspires to be Julia's boyfriend. There is no physical description of this absent character, but neither is there any of Juan or Julia. This is a story where there is a prevalence of the psychological traits of the characters over their physical traits. While choosing the elements that he will tell the readers, Juan decides to tell about the visit he paid to Julia. There, the readers will get to know the personality of both Juan and Julia. Juan's personality will be more deeply known because, as a narrator, he will be responsible for showing us how his thinking develops as the events happen. He is a very direct narrator, he permanently has his readers in mind, and there are moments when he even explains why he chooses to refer to a certain fact. For example, when he says, "And I was still playing the drum." That's what I tell you so you can see. Julia is shown as a distracted girl, but not at all naive. She likes to show off, making previously rehearsed seductive poses. Carlos, the antagonist boy, who also aspires to Julia's love, is a great shadow in Juan's thoughts and also works as a great projected shadow in the story. Since he will never be present in the action, he only appears when he is referenced. Although Juan never expresses explicitly being in love with Julia throughout the story, there are moments in the narration that evidence it. For example, this. When that happens, when she smiles to me, then I take my chance to watch her little mouth, those two little orange pieces, because that's the way it is. She has two little orange pieces, and I know for example that her upper lip, when separated from the lower one, it seems that it was afraid to leave the other one alone, and then it trembles a little bit, not a lot, just a little, and then it approaches the other and accompanies it a little, and then, from between the two little orange pieces, comes out something like a little drop juice that stains a little the wrinkles of her lips, and then I feel dizzy, and I feel a sensation of having something like chewing gum between my molars, and she looks at me and says, "What's wrong?" And I wake up. I know I would never be able to hold her hand, ever. This passage, besides adding lyricism to the story, shows the main characteristics of Juan, his fear, his lack of audacity to face the situations and carry out his desires. Like most young people, Juan just has the money his mother gives him to satisfy his needs. With that few money, he leaves his house and tries to find the gift for the girl and ends up buying a chicken, as mentioned before, something very unusual. Perhaps his choice has something to do with the fact that, since Julia belongs to a family with a good economic position, something we know from the amount of service personnel she has in her house, Juan wants to seduce her with a gift that is not important for its material value, but for its sentimental value. In short, perhaps that, his inexperience, or an impulse, made him think that a chicken would be a great idea for a unique and special gift. After having the wanted gift in his hands, he goes to the place where he was scheduled to meet Julia at 3:30 in the afternoon, at the cafeteria. There he asks for a chocolate milkshake and feels annoyed by the place's waiter, who does not stop watching the box moving because of the chicken inside. As it was almost 4 o'clock and the girl was not showing up, he decides to call her home, but she is not there. The girl's mother, with whom he has a brief conversation, tells him that she had left. After Juan is annoyed again by the waiter, who just asked him directly about the receiver of the gift, that is, who was supposed to get the chicken, Julia arrives. The arrival of the girl is almost cinematographic. She gets down of an impressive black bic with a spotted dress and gets all the looks of the men who were in the cafeteria. The impact of her arrival, the jealousy he feels because of the looks on Julia, and the nerves of the moment make Juan feel uncomfortable. Juan takes the chicken out of the box and hides it in the pocket of his jacket. The first thing Julia asks is if he has been there for a long time, but Juan, full of fear, feels intimidated and lies, saying that he had just arrived. From now on, we witness the psychological and physical struggle of the protagonist, as he is forced to face the situation with the chicken in his pocket. His nerves, being forced to keep the arm in the same position so that the chicken would not scream, and having to answer Julia's questioning about the empty box, were factors that combined caused Juan to end up decompensating. Anyway, also at this moment of the story, MASSIANI manages to introduce one of those almost lyrical passages with which he manages to show the boy's infatuation. Then she ran her tongue through her mouth, wiped the stain of coke on her lips, and stared at me, smiling. Immediately I began to feel lost, as if I was being lifted from the ground. Far and at the same time very close, so much that I could count the moles on her nose, those little brown or sometimes pink points that she has in her nose, and the more I looked at her, the more she smiled, and I flew further away from her, with her smile, without it, with the smile alone, floating in the air, with her smile of red foam, and after that she had flown with her smile was returning to her face, covered her entire face, and I realized that I was there, in front of her. And I felt a sweet little fear in my belly. It was a little fear like when we go in a car and suddenly the car reaches a rise, and falls, and you feel something opens up in your belly, and your belly fills up with that sweet fear that you feel afterwards. It escapes from you and leaves you empty, as with a strange hunger. Then, when Julia insistently asks Juan what is happening to him, because she notices his physical decompensation, he becomes annoyed and changes his emotions in a radical way. From that moment, he will no longer defend the helpless Julia from Carlos, the big mouth, but quite the opposite. Juan, feeling that his dreams are gone, thinks about serving the girl to her antagonist so that he can do with her even worse things than the ones he had thought about before. Julia's departure from the cafeteria is very similar to her entrance. She is getting all the looks with her provocative moves. She gets on the blackpick and gets away. Juan did not even have time to meditate on why these things happened, because the waiter came to his table again to ask if he had been afraid to give the girl the chicken. He did not know what to do. He only managed to put his head in his arms. The waiter went away and, along with a fat person who was in the place, began to mock Juan, which leads to the protagonist's cry, because he felt that everything was lost already and nothing mattered. The story ends when the boy takes the chicken out of his pocket and, after some confusing first impressions, finds out, terrified, that the animal has died. An anecdote by MASSIANI himself, which I think is relevant. Some time ago, watching some videos of and about Francisco Massiani on YouTube, I found a testimony by the author himself, a very interesting one by the way. The video, uploaded by Juan Carlos Corona Enriquez titled, El Día que no conocí a Cortázar, The Day I Did Not Meet Cortázar, is a recording made to the Venezuelan author at his home in La Florida, Caracas, where he tells about the day he went to meet Cortázar. In the video, Massiani says that in the month of March of 1969, when he was living in Paris, at the Hotel Wepa, he received a phone call from photographer Antonio Galvez who told him that Julio Cortázar wanted to meet him because he had read an article wrote by Massiani and published in Imagen magazine, entitled, After Galvez, an article Cortázar had loved. The meeting was supposed to take place on Friday at 4 in the afternoon at the apartment of Antonio Galvez. Massiani went there, but, similar to what happened to the character in his fiction, he did not make the final move. He did not knock on the door and ended up going back to his hotel. Therefore the meeting with Cortázar never happened. I find this anecdote very significant because it is an almost contemporary event to the fiction of A Gift for Julia, published just 1 year after that event. The fear that seized Juan in the fiction is the same that seized his creator in real life.